So one of the most common requests that I get for the Qronge X1 or the X1 platform in general, doesn't really matter what brand, is to make a modifications and tuning video. But I've always been hesitant because I'm just not a huge fan of the app for the stock controller. And the stock controller is only rated for up to 80 line amps. So I just don't think that there's going to be a huge or at least noticeable gain or difference by tuning it. And I've always wanted to install something like a Fardriver controller, which I'm a little bit more familiar with and I know what they're capable of. It'll open up so many possibilities for this bike, convert it to 72 volts, add a reverse button and other features. So today we're going to figure out how to install one on the Qronge X1L. I'm going to start off by removing the stock 60 volt battery, which should just be 3 bolts on the frame, and probably pop the seat off so we can get a closer look at the controller, which is mounted up here, and take a closer look at the harness. I'm also going to be removing the side plastics just so we have a lot more room to work with in this area, since we're probably gonna have to make some modifications to make the Fardriver controller work and get it secured in the original bracket. I believe it should be around 5 bolts holding it on per side, 1 up front, 2 up top, and then 2 out back. So this plug right here was the main reason why I did not modify my previous X1, just because all the other bikes that I've worked with in the past usually work with a Hall sensor, and this motor had a 8-pin connector rather than a 6-pin that I'm used to. I just wasn't familiar with it at the time, but I believe I just have to go with a controller that's compatible with an encoder style motor. And in case you're not familiar with one of these little tiny boxes, this is actually a voltage step-down converter. All it does is it converts 48 to 72 volts to a 12 volt output, so it can power up the accessories on the bike, such as the headlight, taillight, and turn signals, which we'll obviously leave on the bike because I want to try to run those accessories. Next, I'm just going to be removing all the wires that are still connected to the stock controller, starting with the battery lead, just the positive and the negative, along with the signal wire for the original harness, and the 3-phase wires, yellow, green, and blue. And there it is. Here's a closer look at the stock controller. It's made by Talen Electric. It's got a 260 phase amp max. Another reason why I was hesitant to install a controller upgrade on the Qronge X1 is because the turn signals, the horn, the headlight, all the wiring for that is actually integrated with the controller from this harness. So this goes up the stem and to the handlebar controls, and the other side of it goes to this 12 volt, I believe this might be a relay in here, and the voltage step down converter. As you can see, this harness goes straight to the controller plug, and it's fully integrated within the harness. So I'm gonna have to dissect this and figure out what is what, because I do want to keep the turn signals, brake light, headlight, and whatnot. Worst case scenario, we're gonna run the bike without it, but let's at least take a closer look and see if we can make it work. Okay, well that leaves us with 7 wires to figure out. So this is pretty much all I'm going to save from the original harness. Just a quick disclaimer, I'm not an engineer. I have no idea what I'm doing. I'm just some random guy on YouTube sharing my projects with you guys, so try not to use me as a single source of information for these modifications. I'm just going to try to do my best to help you out. So I was reviewing the wiring diagram for this controller. I actually found this in a random Facebook post. I actually don't even have a Facebook, but this appears to be correct. So feel free to pause the video if you need any of this information. But I made little labels for the 7 wires that are in question. The 3 wires on the 8-pin connector, green, red, and black, are the throttle signal, throttle 5 volt, and throttle ground. And then the other 2 wires on the 8-pin connector, the yellow one is a high charge detection. I'm assuming that's what prevents you from turning your bike on when you have it plugged into the charger. And then the purple one is a 60 volt input signal I'm assuming this is what's gonna turn the bike on when you turn the ignition on. So I'm just gonna use this as a signal wire for the Fardriver controller. And I don't think I'm gonna be using the high charge detection function. And then here are the two remaining wires on the 16-pin connector. The white one, I believe, is for the display, like a one-line communication. And then the gray one, all it's labeled as is a reserved function. So I'm really not sure. I'm thinking this might be the M, or the mode switching button on the throttle. The controller that I decided to go with is a Fardriver ND72300B. This is specifically for a encoder style motor. I got it from Qronge Cycles. Now this is compatible from 48 all the way to 72 volts. So if we decide to upgrade to a 72 volt battery in the future, I'm still going to be using the same controller. Max line current 100 amps, max phase current 300. So it's certainly a lot more capable than the stock controller. And this unit supposedly has the Bluetooth already built in it. It's one of the newer models that no longer need to have the Bluetooth dongle. So you can see it has the 8-pin connector like the stock controller. What I'm planning on doing is just wiring it up directly to this harness just to make it integrated like the original harness. And I'm hoping that I don't have to do too much modification to get this to work on the bracket on the frame. Now the harness that came with it is not labeled at all. So I'm going to go on the Fardriver website and also Qronge site to review the diagrams that they have available. But I've installed so many Fardriver controllers in the past. It's actually pretty simple to set up if you just want the bare bones controller to work with no accessories. You just need the 3-phase wires, power and ground. Then you can have a power source wire going to a keyed ignition. This is the keyed power source, hall connector. Pretty sure this is the throttle, black, red, and green. 3-speed switch. I usually pair the Fardriver with a physical 3-speed switch, not like just the mode button that's on the Qronge. So we're gonna have to figure out how to set that up. Then I gotta figure out which wire to use for the display. It's either gonna be the blue or the purple. Now, if you are looking to make more power than the 300 phase amps, 100 line, you could go with a 72450B. It's just gotta be for a encoder style motor. I'll leave links to both controller options in the description of this video. You can also get yourself 5% off anything from Qronge Cycles by using discount code PATOUTDOORS. Looking at the user manual on the Fardriver website, seems like it's going to be pretty simple. The ground, power source, and signal wires for the throttle are all the same as the stock harness. And then the keyed switch should just be going to the orange wire. And then I'm thinking that the one line to the display is going to be the light blue one. So I'm going to hook up those 5 wires for now. But I just want to make sure that the bike's actually going to turn on for the meantime. So I now have everything hooked up except for the high charge detection, which I have no plan of connecting, and then the reserved function, which I'm really assuming is the mode button on the throttle. But I'm gonna take a shot in the dark and I'm gonna connect that to the boost line on the Fardriver, which is the brown wire. I'm gonna see if I can have the tuner repurpose that pin as a mode switching function. All right, so we have the sensor connector plugged, 3-phase wires, battery positive, battery negative. And one last thing is the main harness. I'm just gonna plug the battery in for testing purposes and hopefully everything works. My key on. Controller is beeping because it's not programmed quite yet, but display's on. Headlight turns on. Horn. Turn signal still working. Obviously M doesn't do anything, it's not programmed right now, but so far so good. I noticed that the speedometer wasn't reading any speed whatsoever when I just test throttled it. So I reached out to my buddy Josh and he recommended that I switch the white wire from the X1, which is the one for the display, switch it over to the brown wire since some of these newer Fardrivers use the brown wire instead of the blue wire. And he was able to help me figure out the rest of the wiring. I can confirm that the gray wire coming from the bike is actually for the mode switching button, and I have that wired up to the yellow with white wire on the blue connector for the 3-speed switch. I don't have any of the other 2 wires hooked up on that switch. It's just going to the yellow wire. So that means that the gray wire is sharing the same ground as the throttle, which makes sense because they're on the same assembly. Then we have to change a few settings on the Fardriver controller so it would allow the M button to work. Also, the display is not flashing like this in real life. It's just on camera, but 1, 2, and 3. I'll go over all the Fardriver settings that we're gonna end up with once we finish the tuning. Now that we've confirmed all the wiring is correct for the Fardriver controller, I'm gonna uninstall it from the bike so we can get it permanently mounted. But after looking at the bottom side of the frame bracket, looks like it's gonna interfere with this portion of the frame, which I don't wanna drill. I don't wanna negatively impact the structural integrity of the frame, so I'm gonna mount it on the bracket that bolts onto the frame. That's how I'm gonna have my Fardriver controller mounted. I also decided to clean up the harness with some 3M electrical tape, just to add a little bit more protection and clean things up. It almost looks like it's factory. And so there's no interference or clearance issues with the phase wires, I'm gonna loop them over the original frame bracket. Just gotta do this ahead of time, otherwise you're gonna run into a clearance issue trying to mount the controller on if you try to mount them ahead of time without looping it over the bracket. I'm gonna start with the hardest to reach. It's gonna be the yellow one. Sometimes it can be super hard for me to do this and try to show you guys the camera angle at the same time. And these wires are nothing to mess around with. You wanna make sure that they are fully secured. You don't want your phase wires coming loose and then grounding out. And we just got one last plug. Well, dang. I didn't think about the fact that I may have used some bolts that are slightly too long. So I'm just gonna have to shave down these bolts that went through the bottom of the bracket. Now, if you don't wanna have to do this, just get yourself a shallow set of bolts and flip them the other way. I'm just too lazy to take this thing back apart just to do that. I can't believe how well that worked out. The cable's pretty much in its factory location. Another good upgrade for this bike would definitely be a well-padded seat. The stock seat's just not very comfortable. There's very little foam inside it. All right, let's get this thing tuned. So the tuner that helped me with this project is Josh Daniels. He's over in the UK, so I had to talk to him through video call on Instagram. And unfortunately, Instagram won't let me screen record, so I don't have any of the audio from the whole call. And I'm not that technical, so I can't really tell you step by step how he did this from the start, but I will throw up my tune on the screen here so you can review all the parameters that we ended up with. But long story short, we had to change the angle sensor to Encoder 4096 and temp sensor to CACU, just for the Fardriver to stop throwing errors with the motor. And to get the factory mode switching button to work, we had to change the setting to 4 high, 3 speed low. I'll just throw all the settings up here on the right so you can review it yourself. But I have the controller tuned at 90 line amps, 270 phase, which is technically 10 amps over the BMS rating. So is it gonna cut off? Probably, but I'll turn it down 5 line amps, 15 phase amps if it decides to cut off on us on the road. So once he got all the errors squared away, we started with the auto learn process with the rear wheel in the air, just so the controller can be calibrated with the motor that's installed on the bike. We had all the ratios and speed at 100 at that time with field weakening completely turned off. And then after the auto learn process, I reactivated the field weakening, and then I scaled down the ratios and speed starting at 3,500 all the way to 9,000. I scaled it down 5% every 500 RPM. And that resulted in an unbelievable amount of speed with the rear wheel in the air. Check this out. All right, let's see what it looks like on mode 3. Now keep in mind that is with no load on the bike, so I don't think it's gonna go that fast on the street, but we'll see how fast it goes with a 165-pound rider. Now, if you're enjoying this video so far or found it helpful in any way, do me a favor and hit that like button. And if you like this kind of content and want to keep up with some of my projects, such as this one, make sure you subscribe to this channel and turn your bell notification on. If you do have any Fardriver related questions, or you simply want a tuning service, make sure you hit up Josh Daniels. I'll leave his Instagram right up here on screen. And if you are interested in a Qronge X1 or any of the parts that we used for this project, I'll have everything linked in the description below. You can also get yourself 5% off Econic Cycles or Qronge by using the discount code PATOUTDOORS. All right, first ride on the Qronge setup. Looks like the speedometer is very inaccurate right now, so I'm gonna have to figure that out and play with the settings later on, but I just wanna see how fast this thing actually goes with the new controller installed. Okay, so the top speed didn't actually change, but the throttle feels completely different. It's like super responsive, but you know what? I'm actually gonna go into the Fardriver app so we can connect to the controller and turn up the field weakening just a little bit more. I just turned it on to 0. BMS did not cut off. It didn't feel like it wanted to, but I could feel that there's a good amount of voltage sag under load, and the stock battery actually gets a good amount of voltage sag even with the stock controller. Let's just see what happens. The limiting factor at this point is definitely the stock battery. If we were to go 72 volts with a higher amp output, it certainly opens up the possibilities for a lot more speed. So unfortunately, we're gonna have to cut today's video short here. Installing the Fardriver controller just opens up a lot of possibilities for us. I can add a reverse button, change up the voltage, turn up the amps. I technically only have it 10 amps over the stock controller capability right now. Obviously, because we still have the stock battery, it is the main limiting factor at this point. I'm just not sure if I want to invest a lot of money into this bike quite yet. As some of you guys might know, I have quite a few projects going on at the same time. I actually have one of them right here. This is the 25 kilowatt Yasma IN10. This one's running a Socian FW22 motor, Moxon controller tuned at 900 phase amps within the Morge 72 volt 30 amp hour battery. Now this bike is ridiculously fast. It goes into the high 80s pretty easily, and I have it in the car right now because I am actually on the way to Summer Duck Raceway. We're going to be doing some drag racing today with this bike, and my buddy Justin's taking my Burrow Max XRA build. We're going to do some bracket racing, so make sure you stay tuned to the channel if you want to see those results. If you enjoyed today's video, do me a favor and hit that like button, and if you like this kind of content, want to keep up with some of my projects, make sure you subscribe to this channel and turn your bell notification on. But this is going to be it for today. Thank you for watching.